We're almost there. Tonight, the trap is set. Argentina take on the All Blacks in their third semi-final, looking to take down a side looking for their fourth World Cup. So in order to dig into the game, what to expect from both sides, and whether Argentina just might be able to pull off this huge upset, I was joined by these silent giraffes and my brother and channel co-man Will to discuss first how Argentina have looked as this tournament has rolled along. I think what's really interesting about this Argentina team is how close they are to a typical kind of your image of an Argentina team. And yet the actual tactics and the ways they're going about it are so different. They're so vastly changed from 2007 or 2015, the previous times they've made semi-finals. We've got a really, really distinct Argentina team here who now they hit into a game against the All Blacks. In any previous World Cup, this wouldn't have been the case. Now they've beaten the All Blacks twice. At all previous World Cups, they'd never beaten the All Blacks. They managed to draw in the 80s, but this team is different.
Yeah, they've beaten the All Blacks multiple times in this World Cup cycle is the key difference between this team and maybe the one from, say, 2015, Like, it's interesting, if you look at the 2015 World Cup cycle Argentina had, like, they started that out as, this grizzled, gnarly team who would take you on up front, or at least that's what they were trying to do. And because their discipline was so poor, they never managed to kind of achieve that. And then by the time the World Cup came around, they had, like Joaquin Tukale, Juan Imhoff, Santiago Cordero, like all ripping up, and they're playing this really expansive style of rugby, which was different from what we thought they would be. Whereas this time round, they have achieved that style of rugby. Like they look to have a much more complete game.
Particularly looking at the way Argentina kick, because I am a broken record if nothing else, and what I talk about is kicking tactics mostly, seemingly, these days. The way Argentina kicked against Wales, at first, watching it live, felt a bit like Carreras was trying to remember a game plan. I remember he'd been told that kicking's good, but he was used to just playing, jiffy rules rugby and just running everything. But instead, he was like, no, I remember this is a quarterfinal, so I'm supposed to kick the ball. And when you go back and look at it now, you're like, oh, actually, what Argentina were doing was their tactics were entirely about staying in the fight. Their whole goal is to just stay in the game, no matter what.
Like Argentina, the way that they not only resisted what Wales were putting on, kept maybe 25 odd minutes of pressure to just 10 points. That says so much about their defense, and also just like tactically how they played that game. It's interesting with Carreras. I think we'll come on to him in a moment, but he seemed much more willing to kick on the front foot than he has been in past. Whereas in past, he has just kind of like grubbers only, jouet vibes kicks that are attacking rather than any actual game management. Whereas I think there was a little bit of a change in him in a quarterfinal.
Can I pick up two different points on here, right?
Go for it.
One, first, you mentioned the 25-minute period where Wales were completely on top of that first half. And the interesting thing watching that back is, so there's a moment towards the end of that period where Wales being completely on top, where George North makes a line break while Wales are on penalty advantage, and he makes it down some way. Josh Adams is in support on the inside, and he goes to give the pass, and Thomas Kubeli, I believe it is, takes him early, like pulls him back. Adams doesn't catch the ball, it's knocked on. Referee comes back for the penalty. Wales go for the corner, they overthrow the line out. Argentina get it, they go downfield. So begins a period of pressure that eventually results in them getting their first 3 points. All of that swings, right, on Thomas Kubeli committing a professional foul that he doesn't get picked up on.
Which, by the way, this is praise. This isn't us blaming the referee.
This isn't me saying, the referee goes back for a penalty anyway. There's a penalty coming. Argentina are really, really canny when they pick and choose their moments. A lot of people talk about them as being indisciplined. And in that England game, I think they were, because they were frustrated as all hell. In all their other games, Argentina have not been perhaps the team that's given away the fewest penalties, but I think they've been one of the most disciplined sides in that all the penalties they give away are really, really good,
really smart penalties.
I think Argentina are, and this sounds like a stupid point, but watching them back in this game in particular, in that quarterfinal, they are the best team in the world at giving away penalties.
Yeah, they are. No, they are.
Like,
because that is part of defense. Sometimes you're not going to defend legally. You're not going to be able to defend an attack without actually breaking the law and then sending them back for a penalty advantage rather than scoring a try. And obviously that does mean that if, for example, let's say the All Blacks have a 25-minute period of pressure like Wales did this week, I'd imagine they're going to score a few more points than Wales did.
I think so.
Because they are probably the most clinical team in this whole World Cup, right? Including like as a 20 teams rather than just the 4 that remain.
But equally, right, if the All Blacks have, as Wales did, maybe 3, maybe 4 clear-cut try-scoring opportunities, right? And Argentina are able to take 2 of them out in the way they did with the North and Adams one. then suddenly that changes it. If they've only scored 2 tries, maybe Argentina get a jammy one or they get a couple of kicks. Because bear in mind, they've got bloody Buffelli who can kick goals from literally anywhere. He could take one from Marseille from last week's game and they travel far enough that it's still spinning by the time it goes through the post in Paris a week later. Like, that is an option for them to just continue remaining in the game. And so you then look at how they kicked, right? And Argentina, I think it's really, really interesting, this Argentine team, the way they kick, because they basically exclusively kick on first or second phase. That they either kind of go, we're going to play long sequences of phases here, or we're going to kick. It's not like most teams where they play and play and play, and then they run out of momentum and then they kick it. Kicking is the second choice. It's kind of the backup option. For Argentina, it's a choice. They go, are we kicking or are we running? And they pretty much stick to that one. You look through their team, and Santiago Carreras kicking on average around 6 times a game.
Wow.
Right. Which is very low for an international 10, especially when you consider that the scrum halves aren't particularly higher. So Kubeli's averaging about twice a game.
Okay.
And obviously Bertrand is starting this weekend. He's slightly higher, but still only around 3 or 4 kicks a game. So Argentina are not kicking that much out of their halfbacks, but then you've also got Malia and Sinti who are kicking options out wide. Buffelli as well, but they don't tend to kick much from. Buffelli's only kicked 4 times in play over the course of the tournament. Most of which will be kind of fullback positions.
Yeah, from the backfield, definitely.
So they don't kick so much from the wings, but they do use the fullback or 13 in Sinti to come in and kick not an awful lot, but it's an option for them. It's an extra option they've got available as well. But it's just an interesting thing that Argentina tend to split a lot of this actual game management between their entire team. It's less of a thing of just the halfbacks. And that is, I think, why Bertrand's back in. Kubeli is more of a kind of controlling scrum half, more of an old school scrum half, a far more experienced player, which I think why he played the quarterfinal. This week, they're probably wanting to keep things more alive. Bertrand is more of a membrane. He just gets the ball in and out really quick. He just incredibly technically skillful, technically sound, but isn't necessarily a big decision maker himself, isn't necessarily someone who makes lots of snipes or runs the game and manages things. He just kind of does the decision for his team, does whatever he's kind of coached into doing, does whatever's being handed to him.
Bertrand is like the system player. He will just get to every breakdown and he will play at as much tempo as Checker asks him to. If he then gets a message coming down saying, slow it down, let's just box kick the whole time and, playing their half kind of thing, he will do that. Whereas Kubeli, as you say, is much more about control, game management, a little bit more physical probably than Bertrand as well. It indicates to me that Argentina are probably going to play at a little bit more tempo and try and live with the All Blacks a little bit more. At the kind of like high stakes moments of the game.
Maybe you do have to try and live on the edge a bit more, because here's the thing, right? This is a really good All Blacks team.
Yeah.
But I think the interesting thing about this All Blacks team at the minute is how much they're learning from others and how much that's influenced by Joe Schmidt, I feel, and also by Jason Ryan coming in and really putting focus on set piece, which has never really been the case. As I said last week, you don't think about Kiwi teams and think about dominant scrums and mauls, but Jason Ryan's given that because that is his USP. He's one of the best maul and scrum coaches in the world. If not the best. So he's come on and gone, well, no, we're going to be a mauling and scrum team now because I can make us that.
Yeah, their pack is absolutely brutal. You think last week against Ireland, their best players, Ardy Savir, Sam Kane, Sam Whitelock off the bench, all these guys, because they were so physical, they were winning turnovers. And you're right, they were driving them back in the maul and the scrum. Like, it was absolutely huge from their pack. And that, as you say, that's not what you associate them with. You associate them with more sort of the attack side of things. But they still have that, is the thing. That's what's scary, that Joe Schmidt has drilled it into them and has designed everything based on the team that they're playing against, rather than just generically, this move will work against anybody. He's analysed each individual defence. And like, the Irish defence is one of the best in the world. And yet he's managed to break that down several times.
This is one of these things that when people talk about players like James Lowe or Hadley Parks or whoever, Ricky Flutie back in the day, going
JGP.
overseas and playing for a different nation, playing for a non-New Zealand nation. And people go, well, they couldn't make the All Blacks like third team, yet they're first choice for this nation. The thing is, often these players go overseas and they change as players and they become better players and they learn to play rugby in a different way. And they find a different game plan that suits them better than any of the ones in Super Rugby did, or a style of rugby that suits them better than the All Blacks did. And they suddenly become
Gibson Park would have never won a cap for the All Blacks, and yet now
he
he's one
would
of the
have
best
done
scrum halves
maybe
in the
2 or
world.
3. At most, at absolute most. Hadley Parks wouldn't have got close to an All Blacks team ever, right? And Wales are still trying to fill that hole. He was absolutely brilliant because he worked perfectly in a very, very Northern Hemisphere style of rugby, right? And what we saw was Joe Schmidt go over to Europe and do exactly the same thing, right? And I think he is a much better coach now than if he just kind of climbed the ranks in Super Rugby and gone on and coached the All Blacks there and become the All Blacks assistant there. Instead of going over to France and spending time at Claremont, then spending time at Leinster, then spending time at Ireland, all of that added to him becoming a better coach who is more exposed to more parts of the world, more ways of coaching. We've seen Ronan O'Gara do the same thing, of go around the world in order to learn. Mark Jones in Wales, who did a great job with the under-20s this year. We see it with the best coaches are ones that go and coach around the world and explore and examine different styles of coaching, different styles of approaching the game. And that's something Joe Schmidt has now brought to the All Blacks. This is going to sound like a dirty way of putting it, but the least exclusively Kiwi New Zealand team I've ever seen, in that they approach rugby in a number of different ways. And they still got the very All Black attack, the very all-out New Zealand style attack, but they've added that kind of northern grit that's led to the swing we've seen in the last few years. People were predicting an all Northern Hemisphere semi-finals, right? The group winners were all Six Nations teams in this World Cup. A lot of that came down to the way that the game's come to be played in this far more like tactical defense-based thing up in the Northern Hemisphere. And New Zealand have taken the learnings of that and added it in to their traditional style of play. They haven't changed at all, but they just added things in. And I think that's the big difference Joe Smith's brought to them. He's added the kind of acumen from the Northern Hemisphere into what was already an incredibly strong team on attack.
Yeah, there's no arrogance to the way these guys are coached, you know?
No.
With that in mind, I would quite like to have a look at one of the tries that they scored against Ireland. So this is Adi Savier's try here. So he's the guy who takes the line out immediately. Okay. As soon as this line out is brought down by Ireland, he doesn't move, he stays on the wing, and the rest of the pack moves for him. Okay, the reason for that is New Zealand's setup in midfield has Will Jordan as part of it. So they've got a pod of three in the centre here. You'll see that Geordie Barrett and Rieko Ioane have run what looks like an incredibly basic kind of crash-up move in midfield. But the reason why they've done that is because they want to get both Bundy Archie and Gary Ringrose out of the game on the floor. So Ioane runs an excellent line where he's hitting both of those players. The knock-on effect of this now, so obviously Bundy's on the floor, as is Gary Ringrose, okay? Ireland need to accommodate for this somehow. So James Lowe has come into the centre position, or come in more as a 10, and Johnny Sexton has moved out. He's blinded by the scoreboard there, into the inside centre position, okay? Sam Cane then makes an excellent carry, and then they hit Scott Barrett, and importantly, who makes the tackle on Scott Barrett? James Lowe.
And New Zealand pin him right in. The moment they notice that, clearly, look at Ioane's knee. It is right on Lowe's bum, pinning him in, making sure he can't get back up at all.
As soon as New Zealand realise this, Geordie Barrett flashes back to the blind side, knowing we're numbered up at this point. We've got Savia waiting out all the way on the wing, where Jordan usually would be. Jordan has filled in at the 10 position because that's where he's most convenient.
This feels pre-arranged. This feels pre-run.
It's got Joe Schmidt written all over it, hasn't it? You know,
absolutely.
But they skip out Geordie Barrett here and go to Will Jordan. Geordie Barrett is essentially just there to tighten up the Irish defence, stop them from going a hard drift. So essentially, the numbers that we see in front of them are actually the numbers that they're faced with. At this stage, it's just a 3v2, and they do an excellent job of it. The easiest and best way to engage Gibson Park here is to just make him mark Rieko Ioane, make Rieko Ioane the biggest threat here. Rico's catch pass is obviously fantastic. Savia has been out there the entire time. He's expended no energy. He's in the perfect position. His only job on here is to catch the ball and finish in the corner. The whole thing is clearly set up to get James Lowe on the floor, to get Bundy Archie and Gary Ringrose on the floor, and then eventually to expose what is James Lowe's wing. James Lowe is here now tracking across because it's taken him so long to get up off the floor and go across. Joe Schmidt has clearly researched this and exposed that perfectly.
Thank you for watching that. I hope you enjoyed it again when we talk over that exact same point again when we talk about this game later on. Probably post-tournament when we can use footage properly. But no, that's it. That's exactly what the All Blacks have been doing. That's exactly what we've been seeing of them, is a real analysis focus. They did it on Uruguay. You know, Namibia's only game this tournament where they've gone and just generically played to a structure. Against Uruguay, they were playing structures and tactics and set-piece stuff designed specifically to exploit how Uruguay defend. And particularly how Thomas Nkate shoots out a line a lot at 13, and how they like to slow the ball down an awful lot and set them.
I'm glad that Thomas Nkate had a mention on the semi-final preview.
I agree. Very good player. Can play 9 and 13, which is a rare combination. But yeah, really, really interesting the way the All Blacks have approached this World Cup. You know for a fact they've been doing work on Argentina, obviously because they played them before already. The question is there going to be a level of complacency? Or is there going to be a level of they've played their final already?
I don't think there's going to be a level of complacency at all. I think they might have maybe played their final already, but I don't think that's going to necessarily play as big a factor as you'd think. Here's the thing. So I've just talked about the Ireland defense and how they've exposed that. I think with Argentina, the way they're going to expose them is going to be completely different.
Yes.
I think that the main point, I wouldn't necessarily say a weak point, but the point that you look at and you go like, let's try our best to expose it. Our best in is Santiago Carreras playing 10. Santiago Carreras, for anybody who is unaware, came through as a winger, and essentially he's gotten away with, he's not fly half, but he's played well enough each time he's played fly half, aside from maybe, again, that England game in this World Cup where he looked basically anonymous when it came to managing a game, especially opposite George Ford, who was dropping goals like every 2 seconds. And if you're the All Blacks, I feel like the way you play this is force them to kick off 10 as much as you physically can, get into their 22 constantly, play a really kick-heavy game, which isn't necessarily the way that the All Blacks always play. I think they play a lot more attacking kicks than necessary territorial kicks, like when they're in kind of the middle third of the field. But I feel like that's going to change this time around. You've got Geordie Barrett, you've got Bowden Barrett, you've got Mo'unga. All of these guys have massive boots, and Will Jordan as well.
They've been leaning heavily into long kicks, which is really interesting. The All Blacks have changed how they kick pretty much every single game they play this year. So against South Africa, they kicked really shallow to drag their backfield up and prevent them being able to gain any momentum. And if they play them in the final, I reckon they'll probably go back to a level of that, but probably change it again. And what we've seen generally over this World Cup is against Ireland, they kick long generally because Ireland kick long. So they just try to match them there and kind of cancel
and
that out.
And there were a lot of like chips in behind against Ireland as well, which really worked.
Where Argentina last week went from basically not really kicking the ball an awful lot in the pool stage to kicking a lot and kicking long, kicking really long. And actually the way Wales kicked meant that because a lot of Wales' kicks, again, were about trying to force mistakes rather than necessarily, trying to regather the ball yourself. It's trying to put you in situations where you would make an error if you're an opposition player. Argentina instead went, okay, we might make that error. We're going to make it down in your half. Yeah. So I think Argentina will probably kick largely the same way. I think New Zealand will change entirely. I think we'll see. I wonder, my instinct with New Zealand is you look wide to wide and you stop kicking down the middle and you look to bring those wingers in. And I know Buffelli's a very good kicker of the ball, but like you want to stress the wings and hope that they're kicking from wide positions rather than down the middle.
I think crossfield bomb is going to come into play as well. Yeah. Like I think there's going to be a few of those really testing Malia in the air. Like usually he's pretty solid, but it's much harder to be pretty solid when you've got Mark Talea and Will Jordan competing with you.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Teams that kick long, France were until this World Cup probably the best example. Ireland do it as well, though. Ireland do it down the tram lines. France tend to do it straight down the middle because they want to put you in the most difficult position to clear back, and they want the ball to bounce. And traditionally, teams will watch the sidelines because that's now the 50-22 threat,
Yeah.
And you want to be preventing that more than you want the ball to just bounce down the middle. So it opens a chance to bounce the ball down the middle. And that's what Argentina were looking to do a lot of the time. Wales looks to do it back to them and, Reece Zammit kicks it dead. And there's a few mistakes like that in the area around it. But I wonder whether New Zealand might look to just pin them wider and look to kick to wider positions in order to lead Argentina to only be able to reply to New Zealand's kicks rather than kicking the way they've been doing over the last couple of weeks against Japan and against Wales. Argentina are almost like Rocky in the Rocky movies, right? In that they take a lot of punches, but they're just sort of still in it. And you're like, well, there's no way they can survive this punch. And then they sort of do, and they're still sort of there. And then eventually the theme tune plays and they put in a haymaker to beat you. And that's the way Argentina have generally been playing, is that they just kind of
the theme tune is the Argentine national anthem. Instead.
Oh, yeah. It's any of the songs they sing in the stands because their fans are amazing.
Yeah.
That's what we need. We need them singing the Rocky theme. And that will truly inspire Emiliano Buffelli to rise up.
I would watch Rocky, but with Julio Montoya.
I would love it. I would love it. There's no Adrian in the Argentine team, unfortunately. I just skimmed through very quickly in my brain. Adrian Strauss they could call for. What we need is bloody Creed to come along and just sock them from the All Black perspective. You just need him to just like hit them incredibly, incredibly hard, repeatedly until they're out. I think this game will essentially be decided in the first half.
Yeah.
I think the All Blacks need to put as much pressure on in the first half in the way Wales didn't last week and the way Japan didn't the week before. Because Argentina have now played 2 knockout games already.
Let's say, okay, like we were saying earlier on, the All Blacks have a 20-minute period of pressure at the start where they score, let's say 20 points, okay? Let's say they're twice as clinical as Wales are. Which maybe that's being slightly harsh on them or maybe slightly generous on them, I don't know. But let's say they're twice as clinical as Wales are. can you see a world in which Argentina do exactly the same as they did last week, and they can overcome that and put 25 points back on them?
I think a lot of that depends on the way in which points are scored, because so much of it isn't about the number of points scored, it's about when they come and how they come. And if it's, 3 tries, one of them is bullshit right before halftime, one of them is in the first minute, and they score one try in between, where Argentina score 3 points in response in the middle, somewhere around there. And it's kind of just like a slow effect. And it doesn't feel like Argentina at the game. Argentina have had plenty of momentum, but they just conceded on odd moments. Then I think they can come back into that and they can turn it around, because that's kind of how the Wales game went, is they stopped the Welsh momentum and then they were on top and they weren't scoring the points. They got 6 points from kind of 15 minutes of being on top in that end of that first half. And then the second half, they kicked on and they managed to score more and more and pull away.
Counterpoint, though, that was kind of how the All Blacks crushed Ireland last week.
Yeah.
Like Bundy Arki scored his try and they scored the try of the Maul. And straight away, that Sarvia try comes in, like they're hitting back straight away, but on the cusp of half time.
But I think one of the interesting things is there's no pressure on this Argentina team.
No.
Everyone in that Ireland team, it's the same for France, was aware this is our best ever chance to win a World Cup. And they could feel it slipping away. Where I think Argentina, they went into that quarterfinal as underdogs. They didn't go in given in the last game against Japan. They were favourites, but a lot of people were tipping Japan still. I think it's a very different psyche for Argentina, where they're trying to cause an upset. And I think Czech is very good at embodying that.
Oh, they love these situations, don't they? Checker loves going into a changing room and saying, like, these guys think they can hammer us. Like, are you going to take that? And this Argentina team loves proving people wrong. They love making big statements. It's what they're all about.
Exactly. And so I think there's a world, right, in which New Zealand kick 8 penalties and get out to a 24-point lead. And I think that'll be more devastating than 3 tries.
Yeah, look at the Argentina-England game again.
Exactly.
Argentina were mentally crushed by the second or third drop goal.
And I think it's about how and where the All Blacks manage momentum in order to pull away from it. I think it's about the All Blacks feeling on top, which they did against Ireland very well last week, rather than necessarily scoring points, even though it is important to be scoring those points, because as we saw at the weekend, you can be on top all you like for 25 minutes. If you're not scoring more than 10 points in that period, you're done.
So in kind of a sentence or so, maybe, what do New Zealand need to do to win this semi-final?
Exactly the things they've been doing this World Cup so far, which is be incredibly accurate at set piece, physicality wise, and make sure that you're checking what the opposition are doing and tailoring your attack to that, which is what they've done incredibly well. Exactly the things they've been doing. If they can keep that up and continue to execute it at a level of accuracy that they have been, then I think that's what New Zealand need.
Yeah, I think you're right as well to mention set piece, because we've not talked about the Argentine side about that. But
no,
you look at like Thomas Gaggio, for instance, and Gomez Cadea. Like, those guys drive the energy. When Argentina are winning scrum penalties, that's when they get completely on top. It's a really good point. So what, on the flip side of that, what do Argentina need to do to win the semi-final?
Again, a lot of the things they did last week, which is the really interesting thing. I think they need to kick even better than they did last week.
Definitely.
I think a lot of it comes down to that Rocky idea of just staying off the ropes as long as they can, kicking very long, making sure you don't fall for any of the All Blacks traps, making sure you keep them out of your own 22 as much as possible. Last week, right? Do you know how many handling errors the All Blacks made in total in that entire game?
No.
So Fainga'anuku dropped the ball once and Ireland kicked away immediately. There were no Irish put into scrums. There was one handling error by the All Blacks in the entire game.
Wow.
That level of accuracy is not possible 2 weeks in a row. But if you can get anything close to that, where you're not giving away any silly errors, and if you are making handling errors, then the opposition half, if you knock a ball on somewhere, it's in a position where you can still manage it.
Yeah. Cold take. If they can keep up that level of accuracy 3 weeks in a row, they deserve to win this World Cup.
Yeah. Yeah, and they will. They will. But that's the thing about Argentina, is you kind of just need to play on your own terms as much as possible, which sounds stupid because it's such an obvious take, but there's a real danger with
they want to
playing
keep this really tight, like they did the Wales one, turn it into a dogfight, make the All Blacks pissed off, it's the same point that Connor made last week about going up to the referee, taking a knee, slowing everything down when the ball's not in play. And then as soon as the ball is in play, be really sharp and be really accurate.
We talked about this at the start. Argentina have beaten New Zealand twice in this World Cup cycle.
Yeah.
The model for this game for Argentina in terms of how they approach it is the second win, not the first. Where they're
Definitely.
incredibly good defensively. They kick the ball bloody long. It wasn't necessarily like smart kicking. They just got as far as they could and then defended tirelessly.
Until they got jammy moments.
Yeah,
that they
took one
and they
jammy
turned it into
try
7 points.
from Gonzalez. And then Buffelli was exceptional, really good in the air, and kicked bloody everything. Knocked over penalties from everywhere. And it gave them a lead that they were able to defend right until the last play.
If they're dogged and jammy, they need one or two players to have probably the game of their lives.
Yeah.
And those players are probably Montoya and
but that was the thing, right? That first game, that first win over them, Matera and Sanchez both had the games of their lives, and it took that kind of destiny moment of Sanchez, obviously everything he's been through in the lead up to that, and a lot of that Argentina squad had been through an awful lot in the lead up, and it all came out as this like big emotional moment that you can't replicate, I think, here. I think if they're going to replicate it, it comes out early in the World Cup or it comes out in the final. I think semi-finals are a really difficult, emotional place to manage, and that's where the best teams tend to win semi-finals rather than jammy wins by underdogs who really put everything into it. You know, you can win a quarterfinal like that, you can win a pool game like that, and you can win a final like that, but semi-finals, the week in between, is a weird bit of the sandwich. And I feel like Argentina need to take the model of that second win rather than the first and play defensive rugby, which is not necessarily the way they want to be playing, but I think it's the way they have to be.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Look, obviously, if you ask 10 people who's going to win this, 9 of them will say New Zealand, okay? And the other one's Argentina.
And the other one would say C, Vamos.
Yes, exactly. I can't lie. I would love to see Argentina do it and cause an upset, and seeing this team in a World Cup final would be insane, because as we've established with this Argentine team, once they're in a game like this, anything can happen. And they've done that 1 week, well, I guess 2 weeks on the trot now. They could go 3 for 3. I have no idea. I'd love to see them do it.
We'll be at this game.
A big ask. Oh, you are?
The
of course you
days
will.
after that Wales loss, I was like, no, the thing is, I'm just going to support New Zealand because I hate this Argentina team. I hate everything about South America. I want to burn it all down. And now, look, I've got an Argentina shirt in my case, and I may just pull it out. I may just go along and shout Vamos at everything. Thank you very much, Will. Do you have anything else to add before we go away? Vamos. And for the sake of balance, I will say
I carry my luggage by wheeling it to other people.
I'll just hand some luggage over to you in order to get it to Paris. So thank you very much for watching that, people. And until next time, which will be a preview for the upper semi-final, I want to leave you with one parting thought that I've been thinking of for many years. And that thought is rugby. This is an inside baseball moment, right? We made a video back 4 years ago on the semi-final between Wales and South Africa. I never watched the last 15 minutes back. That video, if you watch it back, is on the first 65 minutes. Because other than the actual phase leading into the penalty, I couldn't bring myself that week to watch back the last 15 minutes of the semi-final.
You say we made that video. You made that video.
I made that
video.
Not watch that game
I made
back. That video. Yeah,
I deserve no credit for that one.
I still haven't watched anything other than Pollard's penalty itself from that last 15 minutes back because I just can't bring myself to do it. And I felt largely the same way about this. So I haven't seen the end of the game back. Still, a lot of it's a bit raw.